All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here on what seems to be a mostly sunny day all over the province. So thanks for spending an hour with us. Um, I do want to start with just the housekeeping, if we can make sure that everyone is muted throughout the session. As well, we've gotten some feedback that it helps with the videos if everyone's video feed is off. That way it just preserves the bandwidth, and apparently the videos have a tendency to skip a little bit less. So no one will think that you're rude if your video is not on. It's just appreciated for the presentation. The session is recorded and it should be posted on the Gymnastics BC YouTube page within a couple of business days if you are looking to review it. And I do want to thank Anna Mataganova very much for the time she has volunteered to do this with me. So the routines that we're judging today, Anna and I judge them together, and so you'll see the scripting that kind of includes both of us. And then just a little disclaimer that this does not represent the official GBC judging or anything like that. It's really just Anna and I's opinion put together. So we will be starting with vault, bars, beam, and floor. We'll just have a quick little review of requirements of each of the events before we start. Then I'll show the routine once. Hopefully the video works. If not, oh well, we tried. You have received them in advance. And then we'll look at the scripting. I know that last time when we did this, it seemed like the screen sharing was a little bit funny and it didn't work at first. So please do let me know in the chat if I'm talking about something that you're not seeing on the screen. Anna, was there anything you'd like to add before we start? I'll take your silence as a no. I see in the chat now. Thank you. Perfect. So I will start my screen share now, and we'll start with the vault. For vault, just make sure that you are looking at the proper JO8 vault start values. Couple of little reminders. There are definitely a limited amount of vaults that they are allowed to do at that level. And if they do any restricted vault, it will become a 0 on the event. So even though they do, let's say, a handspring first vault, they get a good score. Then the second one, they do a front for whatever reason. It is a 0 for the event. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Hopefully it doesn't happen at this level, but I guess we never know. And yeah, so without further ado, we'll start. The first one, as you know, is the handspring full vault. And this is a nice video that shows us a little bit of a slowed down version. Perfect. So now you should be seeing the Excel spreadsheet on the screen. I hope that's correct. So for this vault, it was a handspring full. We did give it its start value of 9.5 at JO8. We thought that the first flight was quite clean, so we didn't have any deductions there. In the support phase, there's a little bit of shoulder angle, tiny bit of legs apart. I did pause this video at different points just to really see the angle of repulsion, and she really does leave the table before vertical, which is quite rare. So that's why I had the little note here of the 0 exclamation point for angle of repulsion deduction. You might have seen a tiny little bit of hip angle, and then possibly a little bit of failure to pass through vertical if she did have that hip angle, which means she was kind of a little bit rounded. In the second flight, a little bit of the body posture. She wasn't quite a tight, straight line throughout. Definitely a little bit of height deduction, possibly a bit of legs apart. And then on landing, we did have a hop. For dynamics, there should definitely be a little bit, maybe somewhere in the 1 to 2 tenths range. She also landed, it's a bit hard to see obviously because it's video and with a bigger map, but it looks like her feet were a little bit staggered there when she landed. And so for deduction, we ended up somewhere in the 0.6 to 0.9 for a final score somewhere in the high 8s. Okay. And so we'll move on to the second vault. And this one was the Yurchenko pike, if I remember correctly, or the soup pike. Okay. And here is the scripting. So the Suk pike, pardon me, at JO8 is a 10 start value. We definitely felt like this was a pretty good one. And especially if we put it into perspective of a JO8 athlete doing a vault of this level of dynamics and everything, I'd be pretty happy to see that. Unfortunately, since that's the first level that the athletes might be starting to flip, we definitely see some scary ones. So it's nice to see one like this. In the support phase, you might have had a tiny little bit of shoulder angle, but otherwise quite clean through the first part of the vault. In the second flight, her feet were completely flexed. We still would like to see a bit more height, so seeing the center of gravity rise a little bit more. We have up to 5/10 there. So between Anna and I, we were the 0.15 to 0.2. And then potentially a little bit more length as well would be nice. And then she did open a tiny little bit, but not completely before being able to land. So there should definitely be an insufficient extension prior to landing deduction there. Just remembering that this deduction is up to 0.3. So we took about half. And then for landing, she had the chest a little bit low, so a little bit of body posture, and then of course the step. And then we'd be ending somewhere in the low 9 kind of range for this vault. Yeah, not seeing anything in the chat there, so I'm going to keep going with our third vault, and then here will be our Yurchenko pike. Okay. So this one definitely a little bit less quality than the previous one, and of course with a fall. I personally, I'm not sure how many times Anna looked at it, but I know I looked at it many times and I slowed it down and I paused it, and really felt like the first flight and the support phase was very, very clean. But of course, in the second flight is where she incurred a lot more problems. There's a little bit of knees, the feet flexed, a bit of legs apart, definitely some height and length, and then a very clear insufficient extension, which caused her to land with her feet very much in front of her and then falling backwards with the fall. We did have some dynamics on there, but still not the maximum. It could definitely be worse in terms of dynamics. And we're ending here somewhere in the low to mid 8 for this fault. She saved herself quite a bit of deductions by having a very clean first flight and support phase. Otherwise would be probably closer to that, you know, very low 8 to maybe high 7 kind of range. Okay. So I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so we can move on to bars. So for bars, I guess it's the same for beam and floor, just remembering we are looking for 4 A's and 4 B's at this level. There are a few C elements that are allowed or that are exceptions, but there is a possibility to have restricted elements, so we have to be careful with that. In terms of the special requirement, I'm on the wrong page here, sorry. There we go. So we are looking for a minimum of 1 bar change, just remembering that that doesn't mean that the element preceding the bar change or that the bar change element must have value. It really just means that the athlete needs to perform skills with value on each of the bars, so both the low and the high bar. And then special requirements number 2 and 3, they both have to be B elements. They could be same or different. One needs to have a flight or turn, and the other one needs to be the 360-degree clear circling element from group 3, 6, or 7. And then the 4th special requirement is that salto dismount minimum A. And then also remembering that at level 8, we are starting to look at the composition. So this is our first level 8 bar routine. Okay. So overall, definitely not a bad routine for level 8. Nice to see the double back at the end. Just not quite tight throughout, right? So let's start with the start value portion. So once the routine is over, I always put in my value parts underneath. So we have kip for A. The straddle cast half turn is technically a C, but it counts as a B, and this is one of the exceptions, so no problem in using this. The next skip is also receiving the A value part because it is a kip on the low bar and not a low bar kip as a mount, which means that it's a different element. Then we have the squat on for the A. The long kip is also a different element for another A. The straddle calf on the high bar, we did give it within 20 degrees for the B. The free hip, definitely not within 20 degrees, so receive the B value, giant B. And then the double back is a restricted C. However, at level 8, they're allowed 1 free B restricted element, so it does count as a B. So she's got enough A's and B's for level 8, no problem. We have a bar change, we have a turn for special requirement number 2. We have a B circle with the free hip and the salto dismount minimum A. Perfect, so her start value is 10. In terms of deduction, you can see on the screen, I had a little bit of extension on the kip. The handstand half turn, definitely the turn. It's a deduction that's up to 0.3. And I did take the time to pause my video and really, try to look at it. And she was definitely in that 2 to 3/10 kind of range. The kip again, possibly a bit of feet extension, squat on, long kip, possibly a bit of extension. The handstand on the high bar, a little bit of angle, possibly a bit of knees or body posture. She wasn't quite fully tight throughout. Then the free hip, definitely some arm bend. And we don't have an angle deduction here because it was a great B free hip. It was definitely in that 20 to 45 degree range, which means that it is a angle-wise a quote-unquote perfect B version of the free hip. Then the giant, we definitely had some form issue there, especially with the body posture. And then the double back feet, a little bit of height, the body posture, the step, possibly a bit of insufficient extension as well. For the throughout deduction, we have up to 0.2 for dynamics, and we definitely felt like this routine should have a little bit of a dynamic deduction, but not the maximum. And then in terms of composition, the only one that you could have taken was a lack of elements that reach or achieve handstand. So for me, the way that I look at this deduction, which is up to 0.2, is that there's kind of 3 main ways that these athletes can reach the handstands. It's with the casts, with the circling elements, and also passing through. Those would be the giants. So I look at those 3 kind of categories and I look at how many of those they reach in order to use my up to 0.2 deduction. So that's my personal way that I look at it. In this case, she did reach and pass the handstand with the handstand half, as well as with the giant, but the free hip was one of the categories where she didn't go to the handstand. So that's why, personally, I have that 0.05 for composition there. And then in terms of dismount up to the level, everything else, she was fine. And we're ending up somewhere in the 865, 87. We were quite close in range here, Anna and I, so probably somewhere in the mid to high 8s for a bigger range. If you can put in the chat, how's that in terms of amount of comments / talking for the bar routine? A good speed? Good, good, awesome, perfect. All right, so we'll look at our second bar routine. Oh, so interested. Okay, so very nice routine overall, nice form. Okay. So again, with the values here, we have kip for A, handstand half, that counts as a B at this level, kip A, squat on A, and then the soul circle is also an other A, so just remembering that these are 2 separate A's. In this routine, it doesn't make a difference, but for some other routines, it might if they're missing elements. Then a long kip A, cast to handstand B. The toe on to handstand is a C, but it is one of those exceptions allowed at this level, counting as a B. And then both giants receiving the B value, and then the layout flyaway for an A. So she has enough A's and B's for this level. Then we have a bar change, yes. We have turn, yes. Circle B, yes. And salto dismount A, yes. So a start value of 10. In terms of deduction, you might have had a little bit of extension on the kip, possibly a little bit of legs apart at the end of the turn, as well as a bit of a turn deduction there for the angle. Then very, very nice. The cast on the high bar, potentially a bit of legs. Then we definitely had a little bit of low back kind of arch coming out of the toe on. So you should have a little bit of a deduction for body posture. We felt like the giants were definitely good enough for this. And then for the dismount, a little bit of height, possibly a little bit of body posture. She was a little bit too rounded. And then possibly a little bit of the leg staggered on landing. No throughout deductions for us on this routine. And then for composition, she had everything she needed. And although Anna and I had a little bit of difference of where the deductions were, we ended up agreeing completely here at a 955. Definitely a mid-9 kind of routine. Okay. Great, so we'll move on to the third and final bar routine. This was the long one. And here she goes. Just putting in a full workout here. Here we go. All right. Well, she definitely showed us some endurance through this. So starting with our values. So the first skip as a mount A, first handstand B. Then the next skip is the first glide kip that is not a mount, so she does get the A. And then she does get the value for this next cast, even though it's in between two kips like the first one, because the first kip was a mount, so it's actually a different connection here. Now this third kip does not receive a value because definitely it is in the same connection as the glide kip on the bars. However, the fourth kip here receives an A because it is in a different connection here than the first kip that was just on the bar. Then we have our handstand straddle half, same as the other routine that is a C, but it's an allowed exception and it becomes a B. Kip, now another glide kip, we're definitely maxed out on glide kips here. Same with the straddle cast. Our free hip, again, exception, so it is a C but counts as a B. Another kip with no value, squat on A. Now the long kip, different element, it does receive the A. Cast to handstand, we're maxed out on these ones. And then two giants, both B. Layout flyaway for an A. So she does have enough A's and B's. For her requirements, she has bar change, she has turn, she has the circle, and she's got the A salto dismount. So our start value is a 10. Now, in terms of deductions, so throughout all those kips and casts, we did have some feet extensions, some hesitation, angle, things like that. Then on the handstand half, definitely quite a large deduction for the turn. She ended up kind of piking very early, which means that her angle ended up being even lower than it really was because we'd be looking in this case at shoulders or hands to lowest body part. So that definitely brings our line and our angle much lower. And we also took a body posture deduction for this. Some more extension and feet problems. Then for the free hip, a little bit of body posture, arms, possibly a little bit of angle. You might have think, I don't know, English problem for me here. But you might have decided that she was in between that 10 to 20 degrees, and then you would have had a 0.05 for the angle. Another kip cast with possibly some extension and some feet. Again, the feet and the cast on the high bar. And then definitely some arm and body posture, feet in both of the giants. And then the dismount, a bit of height, the step, possibly a little bit of body posture. For throughout, definitely some dynamics. Although she did show us her strength and endurance, this is not the kind of strength and endurance that we really want to see in a routine, of course. And then for the composition, she did not have any. She did reach handstand in all kinds of different ways. And then for the dismount as well, even though it was an A, was connected to one or more B elements. So no composition deduction there. And we ended up in a low 8. Any question on that routine or for bars in general? I don't see anything coming up in the chat for now, so we can move on to the beam. So for beam, as I mentioned for bars, we are still looking for 4 A's and 4 B's. In terms of restriction, they are allowed to do dance C, and they're allowed that one acro C kind of freebie, but nothing else. And then for the requirements, we're looking for an acro series that has minimum 2 elements, one with flight, and that's not including mount or dismount. We need 1 leap or jump with a 180-degree cross or side split. We need a turn on 1 foot, and then a aerial or salto dismount minimum A. And of course, we are also looking at our composition, and then there's quite a bit to look at when it comes to beam. We'll start with our first beam routine. And here she is. Okay, pretty good routine. And here is the scripting. Okay, so starting with the press the handstand for a B, remembering that in JO, the handstand doesn't have to be held in the press to receive the B value, she just has to reach support. She had a bit of a low part, then we have a full turn for an A. The tick-tock for an A connected to back handspring for a B. She had sidewards choreography or directional use. Then a switch split. So it's a C dance. So she's allowed to do that, and we're counting it as a B. So a straight jump for an A. Then we had two split jumps connected to each other, both receiving a B. Pivot turn there, and then the front tuck dismount for an A. So she does have all her A's and B's that she needs for this level. Acro series, yes. She had a 180-degree dance element, yes. Turn, yes. Dismount, salto, or aerial A, yes. So that's our start value of 10. Just a side note here, I was looking for beam routines where the acro series would have been kind of a bit more questionable at this level. Unfortunately, with the time that I had, I didn't find any. But just a note to remember that for any series, including this one that has backwards flight, we're not allowed to use our up to 2/10 slow connection deduction. It's either or it's not. So if there's any doubt whether it's connected or not, we do have to break it. Also, we did have new clarifications this year that if there was any movement or any wobbles not in line with the beam, so not following the line of the beam, we would have to break as well. So our requirements for series are much more stringent than they used to be. Okay, so as I mentioned, that was a 10 start value on this routine. For deduction, we had the tiny bit of wobble on the turn, possibly a bit of releve lacking. The tick-tock back handspring, we liked quite a bit. Then the switch split, a little bit of height, possibly a bit of split. The straight jump, definitely a little bit of height, possibly a legs, body posture, but all very, very small deductions. The split jumps, potentially you have a little bit on both of them, but they were quite nice. And then the front tuck, good height, good position. We just had the step there. In terms of throughout, I think beam is a total of 1.3 total deduction that we could have taken. You know, that includes things like sureness, footwork, body posture overall, rhythm, all that. But we just had a little bit on sureness. I think someone could be also justified in taking a little bit in footwork in this routine. And then for artistry, a little bit of expression, possibly a little bit of quality of movement. Not bad at all, but could definitely be more. Now for composition, I'll go through the first one on the beam since we just have so many things, just looking at each of the compositional requirements one by one. So for lack of variety and acro, she needs to perform acrobatic elements in 2 different directions. She definitely had that. So she had the back handspring that was backwards. And then the tick-tock can be used either as a forward or backward element to the advantage of the gymnast. So in this case, we'll use it as a forward, and then she is good for direction. If she didn't have that tick-tock, if she had, for example, done back walk over back handspring, and then the only element forward was the front tuck dismount, then we would have had an 0.5 deduction for composition for this one. And then for lack of variety and choice of dance, no issues there. She didn't have more than 2 tuck or wolf element, or more than 2 straddle, or more than 2 pivot turns. For level changes, she was fine. She did have some low to the beam, some high up, and some mid. Where she ran into a little bit of problem was the directional use. So we didn't have any choreography that traveled backwards. So just remembering that for these requirements, we're not looking for just walking backwards. It must be some choreography that travels backwards. Same for sideways, but she did have the sideways here. So we just have the 0.5 deduction in composition for directional use. Then we have all of our not up to the level deduction. So for acro, not up to the level, the elements that we will be using to find where she fits in is her series, which is an A to a B, so 1 flight acro series. But we can also look at her press to handstand mount as an acro B. So that's why she ended up fitting in the 0.1 deduction for acro element, not up to the level. For dance, she did have more than what she needed, so no deduction there. And then for the choice of dismount, she has an isolated A dismount, so that's the maximum 0.1 deduction there for the composition. We still ended up somewhere in a low 9, just because the quality of the gymnastics was quite good. Okay. All right, so I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll move on to the second beam routine. Little surprise dismount there at the end, potentially. We usually don't really see that at level 8. So for this routine, we started with a mount that had no value. She had a low part to the B, and then a split jump B connected to the changement, or B jump for an A. Back handspring in a series, both as a B. A little bit of footwork. The switch split, that counts as a B at this level. Pivot turn, maybe a little bit of footwork again. Full turn for an A, and then the round off for a B. And then the dismount double twist is a C. However, it's her one exception that she's allowed to use. So no problem there, and we count it as a B. So she does have enough A's and B's, but just noticing here that she has exactly the right number of elements at 8. And yes, of course, she can use the extra B's that she has to fulfill the A's that she is kind of missing. She has an acro series with flight. She has her 180-degree leap and jump or jump. We have a full turn as well as a dismount A for a start value of 10. In terms of deduction, a little bit of split lacking in the split jump, as well as a bit of soft knees, potentially a bit of height. The beat jump was kind of a funny one where it's a little bit kind of unclear as to the position of it. So we did have a little bit of body posture. You could have taken it in terms of precision as well. Back handspring, just a little bit of form. And then for the wobble, I always like to think of my wobbles as not just how much they move, but also how long they move for. I think it's important that whenever possible, we can make the distinction between a little up versus a just because although my body moved the same amount, one is definitely worse than the other. So personally, for me, although her leg did get off the beam during the wobble, she brought it back very, very quickly. So that's why I think our wobble deduction is a little bit smaller, maybe than some others. Then for the switch, definitely some split lacking, and then and then potentially a little bit of height and some form. For the turn, I'd like to see a little bit more releve. And then the round off, a little bit of feet flex, and then you could have taken a deduction a bit for direction. She kind of went around the side of the beam rather than really on top of. The dismount could have been a 1 or 2-10 step, is quite close, I think. Potentially a little bit of height, potentially a bit of body posture, but overall quite a nice dismount for this level. Throughout, definitely a little bit of footwork, and then could have taken a bit of rhythm or dynamics or not, depending on how you felt about the routine. And then for artistry, a little bit of expression, potentially a bit of quality of movement. You can definitely tell that it's a bit of a younger gymnast who hasn't fully kind of explored all the ways her body can extend and create those level changes and differences and all that. I also didn't like a lot of her finger position throughout the routine. Then for composition, we had a 0.1 for directional use because she has no backwards and no sideways. So the full 0.1 there. And then for acro level, even though it seems like it would be enough, it is not, because for no deduction, she would have needed an acro series with 2 flight and 2 additional acros. But all she has in this routine that we can look at for acro not up to level is the back handspring, and the round off. So she only has 1 additional acro, so she falls in the 0.5 deduction for acro level. And we are ending up here in a mid to high 8 kind of routine. And still no questions or comments here in the chat, so I will move on to the third and final beam routine. Okay, oops. So for this athlete, we had another mount with no value. And then she had a low part, tick tock for A, back handspring B. And then we had a two-footed front handspring. It's quite rare to see that on the beam. That's pretty cool. It is a B. I couldn't find the proper symbol with the 2 feet in there, so I'm sorry about that. Then she had her backwards choreography, full turn for an A, the switch split counting for a B, connected to a split jump for a B, and the changement for an A. Then she went low to the beam again and had a bit of footwork. Then she had a kind of a random little wobble on dance. Some more backwards choreography, a little bit more footwork issues for me. Then the round off B, and then lay out dismount for an A. So enough A's and B's. She has acro series, 180-degree leap, turn, and dismount A for a start value of 10. For deductions, the TikTok, we were a little bit of an angle on this video, so it's a little bit harder to see, but she was definitely missing some split in the TikTok, and that's something that we should be looking for, so you could have deduction for that there. Back handspring, a little bit of form. And then the front handspring to 2 feet. Unfortunately, when she landed, and I did look at the video again in slow motion and pausing it just to make sure that my eye was correct, she does land in a bit of a deep squat. So we have up to 0.3 for this deduction, but she's not quite, all the way full with her bum almost touching. She did pass that 90-degree angle mark. Her bum was lower than that 90-degree line with her feet. She also started kind of tucking her knees a little bit early, so you could have had a form deduction for that as well. The full turn, we have a bit of a wobble, a little bit of releve missing. The switch split, definitely some split lacking, maybe a bit of height, potentially a bit of body posture. She's a little bit forward with her chest. A tiny bit of split missing in the split jump, and then the B jump, you might have had some height deduction there. As I mentioned earlier, there was a little bit of a tiny little wobble in the choreography, and then a bit of foot and knee form in the round off. The dismount, we had a step, a bit of height missing, and then you might have had some body posture or feet deduction on there as well. For throughout, definitely some footwork on this athlete. You could also possibly have some sureness, maybe dynamics, rhythm. We have a total here of 2.5 and throughout. And then for artistry, just want, again, a little bit of expression and then quality of movement. For the composition, she's definitely missing her side travel choreography. So we have 05 for directional use. And then the acro level, she fell in the 0.1 category. She had an acro series with 1 flight, but she had 2 additional Bs with the front handspring and the round off. And for this athlete, we're ending up somewhere in the lower mid 8 kind of score. Yes, I realize, Kim, that the video are freezing quite often. That's why we send them a couple of days before we do the judging practice. Unfortunately, that's something that we haven't quite figured out with Zoom. It seemed like it is helping for people to have their video feed off as well with the bandwidth, but oh, I'm freezing. Oh, sorry. There's not much I can do about that. Sorry. If there's something that I've said while I was freezing and you didn't understand, or definitely feel free to stop me and ask the question or ask me to repeat. Okay, so moving on to floor. For level 8, we are still looking for our 4 A's and our 4 B's. We have the same difficulty restrictions as we did on the beam, so they can do dance C, and then we have our 1 not allowed exception for the C acro. For the requirements, we do need an acro series that has 2 saltos. They could be same or different. We need 3 different saltos, not aerials within the exercise. We need a dance passage with 2 different group 1 elements, one of them being a leap requiring 180 crosser side position. And then the last salto, so basically the dismount salto, needs to be a minimum A. Here is our first floor routine. Not sure if you can hear the music, but it is playing on my end. Okay. There we go. So she started low to the floor. We had a back roll that is an A in JO. Front handspring A connected to front layout B to front tuck A. And her second line, the round off A, back handspring A, and then the full twist B. We did have a stylized cartwheel there, but it does receive an A. Another low part, switch for a B, straddle jump for a B. Front handspring, that doesn't receive a value here. It's directly connected to the same elements. And then front layout, that does receive a value as it is in a different connection than the first one for a B. Then we had a turn and a half for B, and then she went back down to the floor. She really liked rolling around on the floor, this athlete. So we have enough A's and B's. We do have a 2 salto series here in the beginning. 3 different saltos. We have front layout, front tuck, and back full. We had a dance passage and the dismount minimum A. Yes, it is her front layout here at the end. So she has a start value of 10. For the deductions, had a little bit of form in the front handspring, some legs apart in the front layout, and then the front tuck, definitely some height missing, as well as potentially a little bit of feet. When we have connections like this of a front layout or something like a whip connected to another salto, the first salto here, we're really looking at it in terms of setting up the next one. It's an accelerating element, so we're not looking for as much height here as we are in the second salto here, the front tuck. So that's why you're not seeing a height deduction here, but there should definitely be one here in the front tuck. And then for the step, you might have had an 05. Just remembering from this season or this season we just passed / skipped over, the clarification regarding steps on landing on floor. It really doesn't matter whether the athlete is stepping forwards or backwards, and if she's doing a step or a lunge, we're really just looking at the control. So this one, you could have had potentially kind of a 0 or maybe an 05 for kind of bouncing into her little lunge that she did there. I had a little bit of form again in the round off, same with the back handspring. She had her legs quite apart. And then the full twist, a little bit of form, and then a bit of height. And then this step here that was a bit less controlled. And the dance passage, we're lacking a little bit of split and height in the switch. And then a little bit of split in the straddle, potentially on the landing here, a little bit of kind of bounce on the landing. Some more form here with feet on the front handspring, and then the layout, a little bit of legs, potentially knees, a bit of height, and then a step. The turn and a half, a little bit of precision there. And then at the end, she's kind of ending with the music, kind of not, it's not quite, for me anyways, it wasn't quite the full 0.1 for not ending with the music, but it was definitely a little bit off beat. So I took one of those 0.05 music deductions. The total throughout on the floor that we can take is up to 1.4, so that's quite a bit. This athlete, we ended up taking a bit of dynamic, bit of music, and then potentially a bit of footwork. In the artistry, definitely some creativity. Like she spent half of her dance time, she spent doing the same rolling kind of movements on the floor. So it's quite repetitive. And then in terms of the expression, she didn't have a bad expression, actually. I thought she had a nice expression that matched the music throughout. Unfortunately, she was really looking down at the floor quite a bit. So for me, that's why I did have that deduction. And then for composition, I'll do the same as Beam since there's quite a bit and just going through it. So for use of the floor area, yeah, she used the floor spatially enough. Variety and acro, she did go backwards as well as forwards with her saltos, so no problem there. And then she had at least 3 A saltos in the exercise, no problem. Then looking at the up to the level requirements, the acro up to the level for floor, just remembering that there's always 2 formulas, the formula 1 that's with 3 passes, and then formula 2 that's with 2 passes. She had 3 passes in this one, and she had a B salto in each of them, so she does not receive any deductions for this. For the dance not up to the level, she had more than what she needed. In fact, she had 3 Bs there, and all she needed was 2 Bs and an A. And then for the dismount, she had the B salto as a dismount, so no deduction. So even though it wasn't a very inventive or interesting routine in terms of, you know, the variety and skills, she ends up with no composition deductions. And we ended up somewhere in a low to mid 8 kind of routine. It was just fine, but definitely quite a bit of form all over the place. Looks like I'm a tiny bit behind here, so I'm gonna hurry on to the next routine. Okay, fun little routine. And here's the scripting. So we're starting with a front handspring A, front layout, both as a B. We have the switch side that is a C but counts as a B to a straddle jump for B. Stylized cartwheel in there, front A. I do have it scripted as a double turn, as that's clearly what she was going for, but with the arrow down, meaning it was downgraded to a B as a turn and a half, just because of when her heel came down. Then we had the side aerial for an A, round off A, back handspring A, double twist, which is a C. That's technically restricted, but that's her exception, ends up receiving a B. Then we had a pike jump, which I'll have to admit, I had to really squint at my video screen because she's kind of far and I couldn't tell if it was a straddle jump or a bike jump the first time, and she's so small there. And then round off A to full twist B. She has a 2 salto series, 3 different saltos, a dance passage, and dismount for a start value of 10. Didn't have a whole lot of deductions in this routine. Potentially a little bit of height for the second front layout, as well as the step was not very much in control. Then the switch side, a little bit of precision lacking there, potentially a bit of split. Same with the straddle with the split. What ended up counting as a turn and a half definitely wobbled out of it with a bit of precision. You might have had a small deduction on the side aerial. And then definitely the step on the double twist was a bit of a larger step, potentially a tiny bit of body posture, a little bit of the back shuffle on the full twist. And then for throughout, felt like this was a nice quality routine. Potentially you might have had just a tiny little bit in artistry, no composition deduction, and we're ending up somewhere in a 9.4 to 9.5 kind of range. Okay. And let's do the last one. Oh, thank you, Anna. Anna is having to leave just a little bit early here. All right, so this was my little trick routine at the end. She was not a level 8 athlete, indeed. So we're starting with the low on the floor, front handspring, front A, front layout full. It is an acro C, so it's her one exception. So she's going to be allowed and count as a B, then a front pike for a B. Another front handspring A connected to a front layout B, connected to a front pike B. Then she did have a bit of a readjusting of the feet. So we broke the connection to the back pike, but it doesn't make any difference for her, so that's fine. Then we had a turn and a half B, another low part, switch ring, that's a dance C, so no problem, she's allowed and we'll count it as a B. Switch half, same thing, counts as a B. Front handspring with no value. And then her front layout full is an acro C. She's already used her freebie, so this one is definitely restricted. So in terms of value parts, we cannot count this particular C as a value part. It has no value. So she does still have enough A's and B's. She has 2 salto series, yes, 3 different saltos, yes, dance passage, yes. However, her dismount has no value here, so that's going to be a no, and that's going to be minus 0.5 for the special requirement number 4 from the start value. As well, because she did do a restricted element, that's another minus 5 from the start value. And we also have to take a 0.3 from the start value for no dismount. So because of this one element that has no value, her start value is now at 8.7. In terms of deduction, had a little bit of feet and the first layout full, and then some height in the front pike. A little bit of form throughout this second acro series, and then definitely some height lacking in the front pike, a bit of height in the back pike as well, potentially. The turn and a half, a little bit of precision, and then the switch ring, the rear foot wasn't quite high enough, and she didn't, although she showed properly the head release, didn't show enough of an arch, so you should have a little bit of deductions there. And then the switch half, potentially a bit of knee form, potentially a little bit of split. And then the last front layout, even though it doesn't have a value and all that, we still do have to take execution deduction. In this case, we just had a step. We did not take any throughout deductions on this athlete, but we did have some artistry, potentially a little bit of expression. And now for composition, this whole dismount business is going to unfortunately impact her even more. So when we're looking at the acro, not up to the level chart, she is a 3-pass routine. However, one of them basically has no value. So that's why she's all the way down to 1.5 for acro level. She's kind of actually in between a 1.5 and a 2, but she's definitely not a 2 because a 2 says no B salto. Well, that's definitely not her case. So she ends up being at the 1.5, looking at the 3-pass routine formula. And then the dismount level, of course, it had no value, so we must take the maximum of 0.1 for dismount not up to the level. All in all, we're ending somewhere in the mid to high 7 for this athlete. Any questions? I'm sorry that we are 3 minutes late today. I have been very good so far, but I lost it today, I guess. As I said, the recording will be posted on the GBC YouTube page, hopefully within a couple of business days. And unfortunately, there will be no time for me next week to put on another session. So it will be in 2 weeks for the next one. I'm still a bit undecided on the topic as I've had a few suggestions. So if there is anything that you absolutely would like to see or would like to do, please let me know. Email me and I'll definitely take that into consideration. And I noticed a comment here. Sorry, I do have a private message here, Adriana, from you, but I'm not sure I understand what you mean. So if you want to let me know later on, that's all good. And yeah, if there's no other questions or comments, that's it today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maman.